Morning, everyone. Welcome to this morning's devotional. Like I mentioned yesterday, we're going to be continuing through just looking at the full armor of God. Yesterday, we looked at the belt of truth and the breastplate of righteousness. And today, I'd like to look at the feet that are fitted with the readiness that comes from the gospel of peace and talk about our shield of faith. So I'd like to read Ephesians 6 and then we'll jump straight in. So Ephesians 6 says, "Finally, be strong in the Lord and in his mighty power." It's giving us the context for all of this. "Put on the full armor of God so that you can take your stand against the devil's schemes. For our struggle is not against flesh and blood, but against the rulers, against the authorities, against the powers of this dark world, and against the spiritual forces of evil in the heavenly realms. Therefore put on the full armor of God so that when the day of evil comes, you may be able to stand your ground, and after you've done everything, to stand. Stand firm then with the belt of truth buckled around your waist and the breastplate of righteousness in place." In verse 15, "And with your feet fitted with a readiness that comes from the gospel of peace." And got to thinking a bit about this, and I think one of the things that is fairly noticeable is oftentimes as human beings, it takes a crisis to rally us or a crisis to pull us together as people. And unfortunately, that's because for a large part, our world is so crisis-centric or so bad news focused. If you put something in the news about something good that's happened, you're generally going to find it on page 4 if you're looking in a newspaper. What's the last little thing? I remember when I was growing up, if you watch the news on TV, they'd have all the bad news, and then the last thing, just before at the end, it was almost like that spoonful of sugar helps the medicine go down. The last little bit, a fireman saved someone's cat from the tree. But when we look at this text, what's quite interesting is God's saying to us that your feet should be fitted with the readiness that comes from the gospel of peace. And that's different to the world, because I think the readiness to go for many of us is based on a crisis. I'm happy to carry on with my life doing whatever I'm going to do, but if I'm going to change or I'm going to make a difference, I'm going to go out and step outside and go and do something big, it's in response to a crisis. And I think when God looks at us, he's like, is the gospel of Jesus, the good news of the gospel, enough to move us as much as any crisis is? Because in essence, the world is in a sin crisis, but Jesus is the good news. And I look around the world, I look at our response to this COVID-19 thing, I look at the response to people getting sick and all that kind of stuff. There's been a massive worldwide response. And I do think that there's something even more deadly than this COVID-19, to be honest, this issue of man's sin and man's fallenness and our distance from God. And so when Paul's writing this to the church in Ephesus, he says, can your feet be moved? Can you be moved to take action, to take this gospel, which is amazing and it brings peace? That's the most amazing thing about this gospel. This gospel is able to reconcile. It's able to bring people back into relationship with God. It's able to bring true peace to someone's heart. Not just this like whatever the fad is or whatever my vice is that just dulls the pain or dulls my guilt or my shame, but actual true peace in relationship with God. Can the gospel of peace, the good news, move us and inspire us to action? And that the passion that's inside of us isn't born out of a fear of self-preservation and looking after myself, but the passion to go is born out of knowing that Jesus, who I know, is the answer for others. That I'm moved, my feet are moved by love for others, knowing that I carry the gospel of peace. And then after verse 15, it goes on to verse 16. It says, "In addition to all of this, take up the shield of faith, with which you can extinguish all the flaming arrows of the evil one." And it's interesting that scripture here, and Paul specifically talks about our faith like a shield. That our faith in Jesus is like a shield. But it makes sense. If you read Galatians 2:20, Paul says, "I've been crucified with Christ and I no longer live." And yesterday when we were talking about that righteousness of God working inside of us, one of the pictures of scripture is that I'm fallen, there's nothing good inside of me. But Jesus comes and he saves me, and Jesus dies in my place so that I don't have to die. But when I come to faith in Jesus, and I think this is a big thought for many of us, Jesus isn't sitting there waiting with his arms to give us a nice hug and say, everything's going to be okay now, I've got you, let me see how I can fix up your life. Jesus is like, your life is so broken, I'm not even prepared to try and fix it. I'm going to make all things new. And so Jesus comes and he's like, you no longer live, but I want to live in you. And we surrender to that. And now I'm hidden inside of Jesus. And because I'm hidden inside of him, my faith of being hidden inside of him is now my shield, because nothing's getting through Jesus to get to me. I remember once someone preaching a sermon, and they spoke about going for a ride in God's top pocket. And while you're sitting there in God's top pocket, there's not a thing in the world that can have a go at you. But it's when my faith falters and I'm no longer hidden in Jesus and I want to take people on. And those flaming arrows look different. There can be criticism. There can be concern about being provided for. There can be future concerns. Where's the world going? What's happening? Those kind of things in front of me. But when I realize that I'm in God's top pocket and he's got me and he's the one who's protecting me, that I'm hidden inside of Christ, nothing can get at me. This shield of faith, the Christ in whom I'm hidden, he keeps me safe. So I hope you have a wonderful, wonderful day today. And we will catch up with you guys tomorrow morning.